So guys, the moment Micah Parsons left Dallas, everyone wrote this defense off. And honestly, it happened. Just look at how bad the Cowboys defense was in the last season. But then the Cowboys played a masterstroke and they brought in Christian Parker as a new defensive coordinator. And now it looks like the Cowboys defense without Micah Parsons might actually be built smarter. Yes, I'm not exaggerating things. What he's putting together isn't just a replacement plan. It's a completely different philosophy. What's up, Cowboys? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Cowboys. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. All right, so look, I want to start from the beginning because I think it's important to understand how we even got here. The Micah Parsons trade, and I know we've talked about this a million times, but honestly, 9 months removed from it now, and we're through a full draft, a full offseason, and one full season without him, I still have mixed feelings about the whole thing. And I think if you're a real Cowboys fan, you should too. Like, if you got completely clear-cut feelings one way or another about the situation, you might be a little biased. That's just real talk. Here's what I think happened. I think both sides, Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones, let their egos get way too involved in this whole thing. And look, I know it's easy to just put it all on Jerry, but I genuinely believe both sides made mistakes they probably regret. And the more I sit with it, the more I think Micah, if you gave him truth serum right now and asked him, would he rather be playing in Dallas or in Green Bay? He'd say Dallas. I mean, the guy still lives in the Dallas area. He's still going to Mavs games, still hanging out. He loved being in Dallas. This was a team he wanted to be drafted into. So yeah, that part of it is genuinely unfortunate. But my single biggest issue with the whole trade was the timing. You know, if you knew a deal wasn't going to get done, you trade him before free agency ever started. You trade him well before the draft when you've got way more suitors and you're going to get maximum value. Once you got past the draft and into training camp, I just did not understand why the Cowboys felt that urgency. Yeah, Micah was threatening to hold out and there was that whole back injury situation hanging over everything. But honestly, he wouldn't have lost value in week 7 or even in the 2026 offseason. You were going to get the same haul either way. That timing to me is what this front office probably regrets most about the whole thing. And then you add in the compensation package itself, 2 first-round picks and Kenny Clark. I mean, look, I've always thought of Kenny Clark as this big contract that Green Bay needed to unload in order to take on Micah Parsons. That's not a knock on Clark as a player. He can absolutely play, but I think the Cowboys would have been better off just getting more draft capital. Like, if that had been an equivalent of a 3rd-round pick instead, they probably still have Osa Odighizuwa on this roster right now, right? You'd have had more money to move around, more flexibility in free agency, and we saw exactly how that played out with the Osa situation. Jerry literally said they couldn't justify having 3 defensive tackles making that kind of money. So they end up giving away the youngest of the 3, a guy a lot of us really liked, because the structure of this trade made it harder to operate. That's frustrating. Now, with all that said, and here's where I want to transition, because this is really what I want to dig into today. The Cowboys have actually bounced back from this situation better than I think most of us expected. And a big reason for that is Christian Parker and the philosophy he's bringing to this defense. So let's talk about the actual rebuild, because I'm calling this year one of the defensive rebuild. The Cowboys are paying Kenny Clark $21 million, Quinnen Williams $22 million, Jalen Thompson $12.5 million, and Cobie Durant $4 million. That's $59 million total. The Packers are paying Micah Parsons roughly $45 million for this upcoming season. So you're looking at $15 million more than what Green Bay is paying Micah. But what you're getting is 2 starting defensive tackles, a starting safety, and a starting cornerback on top of the 1st-round pick they used on Malachi Lawrence. And they also traded back from 20 to 23 and used those extra picks on Devin Moore and LT Overton. So when Jerry Jones said this could potentially be 5 players, they turned him into, he wasn't wrong. It's actually 7 players when you count everything. Now, more than half of that is still hypothetical because we haven't seen these guys play, but that's still a lot to work with, you know? And that brings me to Christian Parker, because I think what he's doing here is genuinely smart. Like, you cannot replace Micah Parsons 1 for 1. That's just not how it works. You replace him in the aggregate. You get multiple players to fill that role collectively, but you also use scheme to replace that production. You de-emphasize the need to win only on the edge. You bring in more exotic stuff. You start winning with coverage. You start creating more coverage sacks. And this is a really important point. Even if Micah had stayed in Dallas in 2025, he still would have been playing in front of that terrible Cowboys secondary that wasn't giving him any extra time at all. So the approach Christian Parker is bringing isn't just about replacing a pass rusher. It's about rebuilding the entire ecosystem around how this defense wins. And honestly, when you look at the defenses that have been most successful in the modern NFL, this approach actually makes a lot of sense. Look at the Chargers. They finished second in the NFL last year in points allowed per game at 17.6. Their best players were Derwin James and Khalil Mack, who are 29 and 34 years old respectively at this point. They were just incredibly deep at every single position, fundamentally sound, no weak links. Same thing with Minnesota, who finished third in the NFL in yards allowed per game. Their best players were probably Jonathan Gernard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Byron Murphy, all really good starters, but nobody that's commanding 3 first-round picks in a trade. And then you look at Seattle, right? They won the Super Bowl. Who are their 2 superstar players on defense? You'd maybe say Devon Witherspoon, and look, Witherspoon is a really good player, but he's not in that generational tier that Micah Parsons is in. That Seahawks defense was built on excellent scheme, a bunch of really good players who fit that scheme, and the ability to solve multiple problems. And Nick Emenwari is the perfect example. Physical freak, incredible athlete, but more than anything, an incredible fit for what their defensive coordinator wants to do. That's the model. That's what Christian Parker is trying to build. A defense that can solve problems, not just stop the run on the way to rushing the passer. Not just one thing. You need solutions for teams with running quarterbacks, for scramblers, for guys who buy time outside the pocket, for up-tempo offenses, for all the different third down situations. Because by the time you get to the postseason, you're only playing teams with elite offenses that know how to win in multiple ways. And you need to be able to counter that with a defense that can beat them in multiple ways. And you know what? I actually think this was something we were already bumping up against with the old structure. Like those 2023 teams were probably the best defenses you were ever going to be able to build around Micah Parsons because he was cheap and the talent around him was loaded. The 2021 defense, specifically DeMarcus Lawrence in his prime, young Osa Odighizuwa, Dorrance Armstrong, Randy Gregory, Leighton Vander Esch playing really well, Trevon Diggs coming off an all-pro season. That level of surrounding talent just wasn't going to happen again once you were paying one guy $50 million. Even in those good years, against really good offenses, there were holes all over that defense that got exploited. The Buffalo game in 2023, the playoff game with Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur, 34 to Philadelphia, 44 points to the Saints, almost 500 yards against the Ravens. When good offenses had tape on you and time to scheme, they found ways in. So what Christian Parker is building is a defense with a high floor at every position rather than a ceiling only at one. And that's how you survive in January. That's the whole game. Okay, now on top of all of this, there's something else working in the Cowboys' favor this season that honestly isn't getting talked about enough. The Cowboys have the 3rd best rest advantage in the entire league, sitting at plus 11.5 in net rest differential. The Bears are at plus 15, the Bills at plus 14, and Dallas right there at plus 11.5 ball. And here's the thing, the Cowboys play 0 teams coming off a bye this year, not one. Meanwhile, some of their division rivals are dealing with 4 teams coming off a bye, including divisional matchups, which makes those even tougher. Since 2015, teams with a rest advantage win 54% of their games. Cowboys specifically are 67% with a bye and a rest advantage. That is not a coincidence, guys. Last year, the Seahawks had a net rest of plus 7 or more and went 14-3. The Rams went 12-5. The 49ers went 12-5 even with all their injuries. That entire NFC West had a big rest differential, and it showed up in the record. For a team that's installing a whole new defensive philosophy under Christian Parker, that extra prep time isn't just nice to have. It's genuinely valuable. You need time to build something new. Now, look, I'm not saying everything is perfect. I'm not ignoring the tough matchups on this schedule, the Texans, the Ravens, the Rams, and the Seahawks. Those are real. But when you combine what Christian Parker is building schematically, the pieces they've brought in through the Micah Parsons trade return, and a schedule that gives this team extra rest at the right times, I think people are seriously sleeping on where this defense is headed. This isn't the same old stud and dud approach we've been running forever. This is something different. And if the pieces come together the way they're supposed to, we might look back at this whole Micah Parsons situation and realize it was the thing that forced the Cowboys to finally build a defense the right way.